Welcome to the V Spot. Hi, Roberto.
Hi. Hi,
I want to like my guest to introduce himself today.
Thank you. I'm Roberto Santiago. I am a recovering addict with over 24 years clean. Also, I'm the award-winning documentarist. I was featured in a documentary we won an Emmy for. I'm a dad of a 27-year-old daughter who won't talk to me anymore because she's living her own life and doesn't want to hear what daddy has to say anymore, but who I love dearly. And I've also achieved numerous engineering certifications throughout my recovery, and presently here with you to check out the V Spot and see what we can create.
I know, I'm so excited. Actually, I'm really excited because, I started this back months ago and I just keep procrastinating. So this is it. New year, new me. I'm ready to roll. So, first of all, we have a lot in common because in addition to me being, in the field as a clinician, I have an adult, son that, I'm also estranged from at this time, which is very difficult. Today, I kind of wanted to just talk to you about working in the industry for 17 years as a person not in recovery for addiction. I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about how you feel about labels. I get a lot of backlash from a lot of my coworkers that, I make too much of a big deal about using the label of addict and alcoholic. I'm personally not fond of it. I just wanted to get your spin on it.
Why aren't you fond of it? I'd like to know that I can engage with you.
So I guess for me, it's the only disease we ask people to identify by their disease. Mm-hmm. We actually discourage it with other mental health disorders. Mm-hmm. So we encourage people to say they have bipolar, they have schizophrenia, they have this, they have anxiety. And for some reason, I feel like there's a lot of messages out there in the industry saying that in order for you to accept that you have the disease of addiction or alcoholism, you have to identify as an alcoholic or an addict. And I just wanted to just have a good, healthy conversation on that.
Sure. I have multiple perspectives on that. One of them is that I go back to the origins of the 12-Step organization, right? When we go back to Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob, and when they first started this organization and they first started the therapeutic value of, at that time, was one alcoholic helping another. The identification purposes was to not forget. Because one of the things that we have found that's been common, especially in addiction, is that when we forget that we have a disease, which that is also debatable too, right? Because the disease concept is is it really a disease? Is it a mental condition? Is it a habit? Is it, what the nuances of that is? But from what I understood in my own personal research, is that the identification purposes was for us to not forget where we came from, because there's this old saying that says, those who fail to remember are doomed to repeat. And what they saw happening throughout the recovery movement, when people first started coming into recovery, is that if you forgot that you were an alcoholic, if you forgot that you were an addict, and you started to believe that you could drink normally or consume chemicals in a normal manner as other people who are non-addicts in a recreational way, you would fall back and even be worse off than you were from the last time you used. So I believe that part of the main purpose of 12-step organizations in particular, to use the purposes of identifying themselves as an addict or an alcoholic, is to remind ourselves that we are in a constant battle and it's only a daily reprieve.
So I'm going to play Angel's Advocate with you.
Sure, absolutely.
So,
Angel or Devil's? Wait, Angel's Advocate or Devil's Advocate?
No, Angel's Advocate.
All right, give me that. What does that mean?
So what Angel's Advocate means is that there's no malintention behind me wanting to kind of argue this with you a little bit.
Okay.
So because I'm not in recovery and I had to do a little more studying about the program and the origins of the program, I was told, and I'm not sure if this is the truth or not, that there was a time that people walked into meetings, AA or NA, and they said they were their name and they were members of Alcoholics Anonymous or members of Narcotics Anonymous. And so I've encouraged some of my patients to just see what that feels like when they go in. And they said a couple of people have given them some oh, you're a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, you're not an alcoholic. And I guess for me, I get the concept of not wanting to forget you have the disease. I just don't understand the concept of identity, that becomes your identity. Mm-hmm. And do you feel like that in some ways has become your identity?
Oh, absolutely not. My identity is not wrapped around me being an addict. My identity is wrapped around me being in recovery from addiction. And there is a distinctive difference in that. And I think the thing you were talking about is what happens culturally. in any tribal community, which Tulsa Fellowships are a very tribal community, right? And so the purposes of being part of something is identifying yourself as that. So, and I agree with you. I think that saying, like when I'm in a meeting, I don't say I'm an addict. I say I'm a recovering addict.
Do you feel it ever gets frowned upon?
Oh, absolutely. I've had feedback back and forth. You have people who are opposed and people who are for, just like in any cultural environment, right? You'll have people who are very stuck in the antiquity, I like to use the word, the antiquity of what it's been like. Oh, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I always like to say, well, telephones were never broken. We still created cell phones. So it's always time for change. One of the things that I love about, in particular Narcotics Anonymous, which is I'm a huge member of, is that we are in our 6th edition of our basic text. So we're always open to revision. We're always open to new translations and to changes. I think in the beginnings of Narcotics Anonymous, and I've been in the fellowship for 35 years. I've been clean and sober for over 24 years.
Wow, so, that's awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate that. What I've seen in the cultural changes is that, like in any organization, those who were here before us wanted to stay the same. And then those who come after us, right, they see the benefits of the changes that we need to make, right? Just like we've made the changes throughout our society in the way we look at people of color, in the way we look at women, in the rights that women have, in the roles that women play, right? In the roles that men play, in our view of sexuality, in our view of mental health. At one time, before the recovery movement came into play, addiction was considered a hopeless dilemma. You couldn't recover from it. There was no recovery. And the label, once an addict, always an addict, was instituted. I mean, as far as I can remember, and some of the things that I've learned, the Rockefeller laws were created primarily so that the governments can understand, know, and control the addict and know where they were.
So can I ask you, if you have an old timer, right? Because there's also the debate of AA and NA,
yes,
right? And,
yes.
The people in AA, when you come into an AA meeting, don't say that you're an addict, you're an alcoholic. And so I just out of curiosity, it just skipped my mind what I was going to ask you.
Right. Identifying ourselves in different fellowships, whether we're an addict or an alcoholic.
What would you tell an old timer that came over to you and said, you guys keep revising the book and watering it down, just like people water down the Bible?
Oh, I've had that conversation. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, you're welcome.
We actually have. It's really pretty remarkable, and I have to be tactful in the way I share, and I want to be clear too. And I'm going to look directly at the cameras. My opinion, whatever I'm sharing here, is the opinion of Roberto Santiago, not the opinion of Narcotics Anonymous or Alcoholics Anonymous. It is simply my experience, strength, and hope in those fellowships. And I want it to be clear. I am not speaking as an advocate or as a voice for Narcotics Anonymous or Alcoholics Anonymous, or giving their opinion. It is my personal opinion, my personal experience. So with that being said, I like to give that disclaimer.
And while you're disclaimering, I will disclaimer it that these are also opinions, my opinions, and that's what makes this a great podcast. Having conversations that are out of the box, dare to be different, talking about the things that people are kind of like, gosh, let's not really talk about that. And working in the industry, that's all I do all day is talk to people about the program and treatment and recovery. So.
Yeah. So back to the question of and about revising and not revising and changing and growing. I have had those conversations. We actually have right now. There are various members in 12-step organizations, and particularly in Narcotics Anonymous, that I've met who are what they call Gray Book members. And the Gray Book members, and the Gray Book in particular, was the first draft of the basic text. And they are firmly rooted in just reading and studying from that literature. And they don't want to recognize, I don't speak for all of them, but some of the members that I've spoken to, they don't really recognize the new editions of, and we're on our 6th edition of Narcotics Anonymous Basic Text, and instead they only go from that. So they're very, and how would I phrase it? I'm trying to look for the proper wording. They're old school. And they want to stay old school, and they want to stay in what it was in its origins. And I respect that's where they want to be. That's their viewpoint. That's where they sit. I don't have to agree with it, and I can disagree without being disagreeable to them. And so instead, what I've learned to do for myself is I look at their viewpoint and I say, fine, if that's where you want to stay and that's as far as you want to grow and learn, that's fine for you. But I also, in that, do not discourage them. I try to encourage them, at least take a look at the new stuff. At least keep your mind open, because my argument at times when I choose to be argumentative or to debate with them or have a deep discussion on it is that I just lost my train of thought, but it had to do with honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness, right? Three key principles in any 12-step organization. And I always ask them, where is your open mind? If you're stuck on it wanting to be the way it was, where is the principle of open-mindedness in this? And usually I'll get, there'll be some kind of argument on their part that, this is the way it was. It ain't broke. Don't try to fix it. This is how it started. This is what was the catalyst of it. And I always like to go back to, yes, the telephone never stopped working. Why would that? If we stayed there on the rotary phone, we wouldn't have the cell phones that we have now. Okay, so it's always good for myself to be open-minded to seeing what the changes are. Do I agree with all the changes? Not always. Am I open to understanding them and viewing them? Yes.
So I guess while we're talking about that, working in treatment for 17 years, one of the only thing I ever see on the walls of any of these treatment centers is the 12-step program, right? So I've got my opinion on the whole labeling of the addiction and I have an opinion on only having one model that's really being pushed in treatment. How do you feel about other programs of recovery like Celebrate Recovery, Smart Recovery, Dharma, and how would you feel if, maybe one of your, peers said, I want to, work this program for recovery?
I have several views on that. One of the things, and I'm a researcher, I always like to share that my greatest defect of character is my intelligence, and it's also my greatest asset, right? Because as I had shared earlier, being in the fellowship, being in 12-step organizations for over 35 years, and having 24 years clean and sober now, those first 11 years, one of the things that I learned is that the program is very simple. It's a very simple program. Everything we need to learn in 12-step fellowship, we learn in our first 90 days. It's not really extensive, and we don't have to learn much more than that. But by itself, it fails. It fails comparative to other modes of recovery.
Wow.
And that's real.
I don't want to do it, but hey, Roberto, thank you.
Why?
Because I think that a man that has such a strong conviction to the program and knows how well it works can also acknowledge, hey, by itself, we don't have the greatest outcomes.
Yeah.
For that matter, with many of the models, actually.
And although, in the same respects, it's the largest. Worldwide, it's the largest organization that addresses the nature of addiction. So in respects to that, it's very successful, but it doesn't work by itself. It has to work in combination with fellowship. It has to work in combination with the work that's put in and doing the steps and, the writing and the reading and the self-analysis. Steps 10, 11, and 12 are primary. All right. But in order to get to them, we have to go through the first 9 steps. And the first 9 steps help us to understand ourselves, understand society, to get to that healing process. In many of the books that I've read, they have shared that in clinical tests that they've done, there are far better modes of recovery that work better than 12-step, but they're not widely extensive to everyone. And many of them cost money and they cost resources. For a free organization where you can go and you have to pay nothing, it is the most successful. And it works. And
I would agree with you, Roberto. We're on the same page with that one. It's the most accessible. It's the most accessible program in the world. And so I definitely, we agree on that piece. You mentioned it's a simple program, and I don't find it to be that. Being a parent, being a person who loves someone with addiction, I did not find Al-Anon to be a simple program, and Al-Anon is simply the same 12 steps.
Yeah, but Al-Anon is much different than, and I'm sorry, let me not interrupt you. I'd like to let you finish first.
No, that's okay. And what I'm saying is and I have a very good colleague who says that the 12-step program is a perfect program. And it's a perfect program. And I'll always say to him, if it's so perfect, maybe it's so perfect that imperfect people can't work it. So what do you mean by simple? When you say, give me more on it's a simple program. Help me understand.
I'd love to. Before I go into the simplicity, and I'll try to segue right into it, I wanted to address when you said Al-Anon, right? You talked about Al-Anon being similar and or maybe the same. You are correct in the fact that they are similar. They are very, very similar. But the main difference that I find between and I'm going to primarily talk about Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, is that the simplicity of the program is that it's based on abstinence. So it's simple. Remove this and then start working on myself. So that's the simplicity of it, right? And the difference which what makes Al-Anon much more complicated is that it's not about eliminating the other person. It's about building a different and healthier relationship with them.
I heard that differently than I've been able to hear before,
So
Roberta.
when you are in an Al-Anon program or a Nar-Anon program or a program that has to deal with building a relationship with something like, I like to associate with Food Addicts Anonymous, right, or Overeaters Anonymous, right? They have a much different program, although they follow the same 12 steps in its simplicity, right? The difference with them is that they can't remove food from their life. What they have to do is begin to build a different relationship with food. And so it's much more challenging for someone in Overeaters Anonymous than it would be for someone in Narcotics Anonymous or Alcoholics Anonymous. The reason being is that they can't remove food. Al-Anon, you can't remove the person. Although you can, you still have to have that relationship with them. And they're still part of our lives, right? Whether they're using or they stay clean or not, we still, in Al-Anon, and I myself being an adult child of an alcoholic, addict, I had to go through ACLOA, Adult Children of ACOL, I forget the acronym.
ACOA.
ACOA.
By the way, Roberta, they just changed it to Adult Children of Dysfunctional Families, which means that it is more accessible to children that grew up with mental health as well as just addiction or any other,
That's great.
Yeah, it's great.
And the reason I brought ACOA up, and I'll learn the new acronym as we progress in this, is that when I did those steps, I didn't start doing those steps until, Susan, now how many years were we together before I started those steps? Because you introduced me to ACOA. You introduced me to the workbook. So
come pop in, Susan. Come pop in, my love.
That's Susan. That's
some of you
one of Tina's best friends, and also my best friend and my life partner and my ex-wife and my girlfriend and my girlfriend too.
My forever lover.
My forever lover. Yes,
love it.
So when Susan introduced me to ACOA and I started reading it, because one of the things that happened to me in my first 11 years in recovery was that, and I said my intelligence is one of my greatest defects, is that I learned it all. It was simple, and I had the intellectual knowledge of it. What I didn't know then that I learned now was that I didn't know how to put into practical application all of the things that I had learned in my head. And that's what they talk about in Talks of Fellowship, is the journey from our head to our hearts. Right? And then learning to live by those principles. That's the most challenging part. So when I started on ACOA, in the beginning of the yellow, I called it the yellow book because I had a yellow cover on it, it actually tells you we highly recommend you do not work these steps unless you have or are in therapy with someone to help you through them.
Absolutely.
Because the root of the things that are going to be discussed and the things that we have to delve into can trigger the traumas and the horrors of the atrocities that were committed upon us in our childhood, right? Because that's what we're dealing with. Now, how does that differ from 12 Steps in Narcotics Anonymous? In the 12 steps, our first 12 steps, when we do 1, 2, and 3, right? 1 is about our powerlessness and admitting it and understanding I'm an addict, right? And I suffer from the disease of addiction. Our second step is my life has been insane. I've been totally crazy in what I've been living and how I've been thinking. I need to have a restoration to my sanity. In our third step, we make a decision. I'm going to turn my will and life over. Now, for many of us, will and life is something that we go, I don't know if I could do that. And the word God becomes something that is tied to like some dogmatic religious organization, right? And so many people kind of get stuck in that phase. My viewpoint on it is that our will is very simple. It's our thoughts, feelings, and emotions, everything that goes on in our heads. So we're turning that over, thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And our will is our actions, deeds, and words. Right? So my actions are the things that I do every day, get up, go to work. My deeds are things I do deliberately, right? When I go to a meeting, what I share, how I show up for people, how I have in conversation, right? All right, my actions, my deeds, and my words are the things that I say.
You know why I'm breathing?
Why?
Not to interrupt, because boy, I could just keep going. You mentioned people get stuck on God, right?
Yes.
So I get stuck personally when I'm working with my patients, right? Mm-hmm. From this perspective, not a recovery perspective, where I have my patients tell me, I can't help it, I'm powerless. I hate the fact that I'm powerless. And then me, Little Miss Rebellion, has to point out that step 1 is in past tense, and it says we admitted we were powerless, and then our lives had become unmanageable. So getting off track a little bit, like, what do you feel about that? Are you powerless, or were you powerless? And how does that word powerless, why is it so like profound in the program?
I'll bring it right into what I was saying with the third step, right? In the third step, it says we turn our will and life over. Actions, deeds, and words, right? What actions, deeds, and words. What we do without consciousness and what we do deliberately, right? Our actions are what we do on our normal driving to work, whatever it might be. Our deeds are how we react to all of the things around us, and our words are the things that we say. So when I'm turning that over, what am I turning it over to? It says God, right? So I like to use the acronym Good Orderly Direction for those of us who have a problem with religious organizations. All right. I have a whole nother podcast that we can do about religion and being involved and being a pastor and a minister and all of those things, and coming out of that and removing myself from religious organizations and going on a more spiritual path, right? Good orderly direction is a clear, concise movement. I like to use the word God in association with I-95, right? Most of us know what I-95 is. Some love I-95, some hate I-95. At certain times of the day, we love to be on I-95, but I-95 is simply letters and numbers that are pointing away. The word God is just simply pointing away to good order direction. I-95 gets us to a destination. There is no state in the United States that can claim I-95 to itself, just as there is no religious or spiritual organization that can claim to have the only God, but they do anyway, right? Some do, right? So I'm going to bring this to the powerlessness, because I think you're going, what does that have to do with the powerlessness question?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I have a different view, because to me, God is God. And if it was supposed to be good orderly direction, it would say good orderly direction. And I feel that sometimes that's what makes it difficult for some of my patients to understand, like, when people tell them, this chair could be your guide.
I disagree with that 100%. I disagree.
Or your peer could be your God, your higher power. I don't know if I have a problem with it in life. I have a problem with it in that sense of the program, and maybe that's just some of my stubbornnness. Maybe my closed-mindedness to some of this.
Right. I disagree with the light bulb God or the doorknob God or the chair God. I mean, it's very clear. Oh, I've heard it many times, and I've always disagreed with it. And I subscribe to the fact that it tells us very clearly in the literature, in both fellowships, that the God of our understanding must be a power greater than ourselves. Now, if I create something, a doorknob, a light bulb, I am greater than that which I have created. So that cannot be the God of my understanding. It must be something greater than I. Right? I don't know what God actually is. I don't claim to. I do know this. The science says that we have a spark of electricity which ignites our heart, which allows it to beat. At a certain point, both medicine and science say that is an unknown fact, that they don't know where that originates from. They know that it's there. That is the God of my understanding. I always like to share with people, I can show you my God if you want to know and see my God. I can show it very clearly to you. And I take a deep breath and I go, God is the breath of life, right? So if God is in me, right, and I am the breath of life, then God is in you. But that doesn't make you my God. That means that the God of my understanding speaks to me through people, through experiences, through the things that happen in my life. I don't necessarily believe in the God in the sky or the beard and all of those things, but I like to believe that each and every one of us has the spark of electricity which allows us to live. God lives in nature. God lives in the things all around us, even in the inanimate objects that we create, because they are an extension of us. But I want to go back to powerlessness. Okay. And I want to go back to the concept that you had asked me earlier about are we powerless? Were we powerless, or are we still powerless? Right. And what I've come to understand, and in our literature, in the literature, and I believe in both fellowships, it says that we came from a state of being powerless. And it doesn't mean that we become powerful over our addiction, right? Or the drugs, or the chemicals that we use, because that's really my main topic, and that's what I can really talk about. But instead, in our 11th step, it says we pray for a power, right? We pray for a power greater than ourselves, just like it tells us in the second step, to restore us to sanity. And what is sanity? It's perspective and perception, right? Because sanity in different cultures and different societies are different, right? What some societies and some cultures think is sane, we think is like, that's totally insane. But sanity is basically based in our culture and where we are and where we live and how we can adapt and be part of that culture, right? So if I'm countercultural, or I am destructive to the tribe that I belong to, then there's a certain level of insanity that's going on there. Now, am I powerless over that individual? Am I powerless over myself? Yes and no. Am I powerless over my thoughts, feelings, and emotions? Absolutely. We always are. Some of us at any given time will have a thought or a feeling that we have no power over whatsoever. But what happens is that the power that we're given is how we choose to direct ourselves based on those thoughts, feelings, and emotions. That is where our will comes in. So when I'm turning it over to a power greater than myself, whether it's the organization, whether it's my fellowship, whether it's my support group, those powers greater than myself are not necessarily the God of my understanding, but they empower me. And so then I'm given empowerment
I
to
feel
make
that.
decisions about what is it that I'm going to do next? How am I going to react or respond? And that is key and critical in the recovery movement. I'm finished. I'd love to hear your response.
So you don't feel powerless.
No, I'm not powerless, but I am powerless. So there's a dichotomy to it, right? Or duality. And that is, I'm powerless over my thoughts. And I'll be, I'm gonna share some thoughts that I'm powerless over. I don't necessarily like sharing them, right? But I'm powerless over the thought that arises sometimes for me when I'm in melancholy that tells me I don't want to exist anymore. I don't choose to have that. I don't bring that thought into my mind.
Okay.
It arises and I am completely powerless over that thought. When I think about my daughter and how sad I feel and how heartbroken I feel that she doesn't want to talk to me anymore, I am powerless over that emotion. I don't create it. I don't empower myself and go, I want to feel sad. I want to feel like I don't want to exist. I want to feel melancholy. I want to stay under the covers. I'm powerless over those. But what I am empowered with as a result of the 12-step organization is to work through the steps and see, okay, I'm powerless. First step, I'm powerless over that thought, feeling, and emotion. All right, the second step, if I stay stuck in this feeling that I'm powerless over, this thought, you know what? I could have a drink. I could have a glass of wine. You know what? I can have one shot of heroin. I can have one hit of a crack. I can take a line of cocaine. I can smoke some marijuana. I can use the chemicals that completely made me powerless over, that overwhelmed my life. I can have just one because one is not going to destroy me. Probably not. But it's what's going to happen after that. I'm powerless over those thoughts. But what I am empowered with is the ability through those step processes, right? First step, I'm powerless over those actions. If I commit them again, I am. I was powerless over those, right? The restoration to sanity says that, wait a minute, if I continue staying in this powerless thought, okay, that I have no power over, and I instead make a decision to turn my will and life over, what am I turning my will and my life over? A God of our understanding? What is the God of our understanding? 12 principles that are embodied in our steps.
So I agree with
fellowship.
you. And I like that. I like the way you explained that with powerless over the thoughts. I think that's very helpful, especially
I'm not powerless over my actions, deeds, and words.
So that's the difference. And I think that this is my opinion.
Yeah.
We need to be preaching that more.
Yes.
So that when I have a patient that walks in, and believe me, I'm grateful when they come in for the 7th time.
Yeah.
You know, everybody says, welcome back. We're so glad you made it back. And
Yeah.
I am too.
Yes.
But when I have a patient say to me, I can't help it. I'm an addict.
Right.
I'm powerless.
Yeah.
I feel like that message still sometimes is being maybe misconstrued or what's the word I'm looking for?
Misunderstood.
No, like we're not sending it correctly, because I think if we could explain it just the way you just did, yeah, you are powerless of that thought, but you are not powerless over your behavior.
Yeah.
I think it would really help patients, because again, I am not walking in your shoes, Roberta. So I don't know what it's like to have a thought to want to use, but I do know what it's like to have a thought when my son wasn't, and isn't speaking to me, or he's in a really dark place where I think, God, it would be better if I didn't wake up.
Yes.
It's not that I want to die. I have no plan on, but like, God, it would just be easier not to wake up. But I know I have the ability to make decisions, and I am empowered to make, my behavior.
Yes.
So again, I feel like these things are really important to talk about. And I feel like defensiveness comes up when people talk about this stuff. How do I know that? Because I'm defensive.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I get defensive. So, and I think it's my defensiveness is not just because I want to be right. And I'm going to get sad when I say this. I'm frustrated. Yeah. I get defensive because I'm frustrated to see people lose their children as a result of addiction. I see people losing their careers. I see people losing their lives, and that's why I get so, like I got to, figure this out somehow. And it's not my powerless. Job. It's not my job.
You feel powerless.
Helpless,
Yeah.
It's just a word.
But you're not helpless, though,
right.
Because you're doing exactly what it is that you can do in our little small niche of the world that we can make some significant change.
So, I mean, listen, I'm definitely going to have you back on
Oh, I
because
appreciate
I just
that.
love this conversation.
Me too.
But I guess for me, what would you tell someone who came in the rooms and said, you know, I just don't want to be labeled an addict. I don't want to be powerless. I don't, you know, I want to come to these meetings, but I want to be able to be myself. I want to be able to, like, what would you say to them if they just said, I don't want to call myself an addict? What'd you say?
I have an answer for that because I have had that experience. And for those who come to me and seek my counsel and advice, I don't give unsolicited advice. That's one of the biggest things in 12-step fellowship that I work on not doing, because our literature is very clear that we are not here to give our opinions to people or tell them how they should or shouldn't live their lives. We are simply here to be an example. And the greatest form of advice that we can give is just by being an example by the way we live our lives. I have at times struggled with the label I'm an addict, which is why I identify myself as a recovering addict. What I tell people who don't want to have the label of addict, I say, you're part of a tribe and you're part of an organization, and they're asking you and requesting for you if you want to be a member. And like just like in any organization, if you're going to be a member of a community, if you're going to be a member of a religious organization, you have to abide to some degree to the kind of the social dynamics of which they request. So what I share to them is say, if you don't want to say you're not, I say, I'm in recovery and my name is so-and-so. There you go.
Love it.
You've just removed your stigma that we have attached to the word. Now, here's another thing that I like to add to that. I also try to tell them, don't be so attached to the word. It's just a word. That's all it is. And that word isn't as powerful as you think. And it can only be as powerful or as powerless as you choose it to be. Which, again, why I identify myself as a recovering addict. And I'll finish, I'll wrap it up with this part, right, on this particular topic. For my first 11 years, when I was going in and out of the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous, and I was chronically relapsing, okay? I would go to meetings and I'd raise my hand and I would say, I'm a chronic relapser, my name's Roberto. And it wasn't, and this is where I kind of contradict myself in a way, where I say how words were not as powerful and don't be so attached to them, but they also are very powerful in identifying ourselves. It wasn't until I came back in 2001 when my sponsor told me, stop identifying yourself that way. And I said, why? That's how I feel about who I am. He says, what you say you are is what you become. And he says, if you continue to say that you're a chronic relapser, then what do you think you will continue to do? And I realized, oh my God, right. And so that's where I shifted and said, okay, I'm in recovery. So I'm a recovering addict. And I'm recovering from the disease of addiction.
And again, we close off with this. I know you disclaimered it, that these are your opinions.
Yes.
And
I don't want to close the conversation. I was just wrapping up that question. I want to keep talking.
Well, we are.
I think we need to go for more.
I want
we need to have double content.
We're going to have part two. I just want to say, though, going back to what you said, is I guess that's where I was going with this podcast to start with. That, you know what, two things could be right.
Yes.
You know, like words matter, and maybe don't be so attached to words. Yeah. Labels matter, but don't be so attached to labels. And again, to have more conversations and to have people be able to be themselves, their true, authentic selves. And if they're a little out of the box, let them be, you know? Yeah. So part two coming soon.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Love you.
Appreciate it. Love you too. See you guys.
All right.